The first scream came before the castle bells. It ripped through the midnight market so sharply that every merchant, drunk noble, and gutter child turned at once. A woman in a gray cloak was being dragged through the square by two armored riders bearing the black crest of the vampire king. Her hood had fallen back. Her pale hair spilled down her shoulders. Her face was thin, feverish, terrified. "Please," she cried, digging her heels into the wet stone. "My daughter is still at home." The crowd recoiled, whispering her name like it carried bad luck. Lillian Wells, the healer from Thornwick Alley, the poor woman who treated the sick for free. The riders ignored her tears and hauled her toward the fortress carriage while nobles watched from the tavern balconies with cold amusement. Then the carriage door opened and the vampire king himself stepped down into the torchlight, tall, silent, crowned in black iron. His face looked carved from winter and fury. Lillian froze when she saw him. He froze too, because for one brutal second, it looked like the king had just found the ghost of the only woman he had ever loved chained in the middle of his own city. Hello friends, welcome to our story. Before we begin, please like this video, subscribe to the channel, and tell me in the comments where you are watching from tonight. And now ask yourself this. If the most feared king in the night found out the woman he loved was stolen from him and forced to suffer in poverty while their child grew up starving, how much blood do you think he would spill before dawn? King Darius Valemont did not blink. He did not breathe. He did not move. The whole market went silent as his ember-red eyes locked onto Lillian's face. 6 years of grief, rage, and unanswered questions crashed into that one moment so violently that even the guards seemed to feel it. One of them let go of her arm in fear. Lillian swayed where she stood, weak from fever and terror, staring at the king like she knew him and did not know him at the same time. Her mouth trembled. "Who are you?" she whispered. The question hit Darius harder than a blade. His jaw locked. Around them, nobles leaned forward, hungry for scandal. They saw a poor human woman in rags. He saw the woman whose portrait had haunted his halls for years. He saw the woman he had wanted to make his queen, and worst of all, he saw no recognition in her eyes. Then a small voice cut through the silence. "Mama!" The crowd parted just enough for a little girl in a faded red dress to stumble into the square, clutching a basket of crushed night roses. Her shoes were soaked through. Her cheeks were raw from cold, but she ran straight toward the woman the riders had seized and threw herself around her waist. "Mama, I woke up and you were gone," she cried. Lillian dropped to her knees and hugged the child so tightly it looked painful. Darius felt something cold slide down his spine. The girl lifted her head and the king saw her eyes, storm gray, wide, defiant, familiar, too familiar. She looked up at him with fear and confusion and the kind of stubborn courage only children and fools possessed. "Why are your men hurting my mother?" she asked, loud enough for everyone to hear. No one in the market had ever spoken to the vampire king like that and remained standing. The captain of the guard stepped forward quickly, trying to save the moment. "Your Majesty, the woman was taken under council authority. We had orders to bring her to the palace for questioning regarding unlawful herbcraft." "And who gave those orders?" Darius asked. His voice was calm, too calm. The captain swallowed. "The High Council, sire. Elder Marcellus signed the decree." Darius's eyes never left the child. "And who gave you permission," he said softly, "to lay hands on a sick woman in front of her daughter?" The captain dropped to one knee at once, his face draining of color. The market held its breath. Darius stepped closer. The child instinctively moved in front of her mother, tiny shoulders squared as if her small body could stop a king. He stopped just short of her and looked down. She was thin, hungry, shaking. Her basket held only 3 roses. He had seen armies stand with less courage. "What is your name?" he asked. "Amara," she said, chin lifted. "Amara Wells." The name struck him like thunder in a sealed room. Wells. Lillian had kept her own name. Lillian had survived, and she had a daughter 6 years old. One of the nobles on the balcony laughed under his breath. "How touching! The beggar child protects the witch." Another added, "Perhaps the king will pardon every gutter rat tonight." Amara heard them. Lillian heard them too, and the humiliation on her face was worse than fear. Darius slowly turned his head toward the balcony. "Bring them down," he said. Guards moved instantly. The laughing nobles were dragged into the square before they could even protest. Darius did not raise his voice. "Apologize," he told them. They stared at him in disbelief. "Your Majesty," one stammered. "To the woman," Darius said, "and to the child." The market erupted in whispering. A vampire lord apologizing to a poor human healer was unthinkable. That was exactly why Darius made them do it. The men bent, pale with rage and humiliation, and muttered apologies that shook with swallowed pride. Amara looked at Darius with surprise. Lillian looked at him with something else, something like pain. Something like a memory trying to claw its way through fog. Then Lillian's body gave out. Her fever had been burning for days and the shock was too much. She collapsed sideways. Amara screamed. Darius caught Lillian before she hit the stone. The moment her body touched his arms, a wave of memory hit him so hard his vision blurred. Moonlit woods, her laugh, her hand in his. The night he promised her forever. He looked down at her face, flushed with sickness and years of hardship, and for the first time in 6 centuries, the king's control cracked in public. "Get the carriage," he snapped. "Now," the captain scrambled to obey. "No," Amara said at once, gripping her mother's sleeve. "Don't take her away. Everybody takes from us. You can't have her." Darius looked at the child. Every eye in the square watched him. He could command, threat, force. That was what kings did. Instead, he bent one knee in the mud and met her gaze. "If I wanted to take her from you," he said quietly, "I would not ask. But I am asking. Let me help her, Amara. She may die if I do not." The child searched his face with a seriousness too old for 6 years. Then she looked at her mother, burning with fever in his arms. Her mouth trembled. "If she dies," she whispered, "I'll hate you forever." Darius nodded once. "Then I will make sure you never have to." The ride to Valemont Castle felt like entering another world. The market's filth and noise vanished behind iron gates taller than houses. Amara sat curled on the velvet bench of the carriage, clutching her crushed roses while Lillian lay across Darius's lap unconscious. The king had wrapped his cloak around her, and the sight was so strange Amara could barely understand it. Men in armor bowed as the carriage passed. Servants rushed ahead, opening doors. The castle rose above them like a black mountain carved into towers and claws. It should have felt like a place where monsters lived. Instead, what frightened Amara most was how quiet it was, too clean, too still, like grief had swallowed every sound. Darius carried Lillian through the grand hall himself while physicians and servants hurried after him. No one dared question him. No one dared look too closely at the child following in wet shoes and poverty-stained dress. But they all stared. Amara felt it. The disgust, the curiosity, the fear. She kept walking anyway. Lillian was taken to a warm chamber near the West Tower, and the castle physicians began working at once. Amara stood near the bed, refusing to leave, watching every bottle and cloth and spoon as if she could fight sickness by force of will. Darius stood on the opposite side of the room, listening to the oldest physician mutter about fever, exhaustion, tainted water, untreated infection. Each word was another accusation, not against Lillian, against him. Against the years he had spent believing she left him, against the kingdom that had allowed her to rot in the dark while he ruled from stone and shadow. When the physician finally said, "She should survive if the fever breaks tonight," Amara's knees nearly gave out. Darius moved before thinking and steadied her with one hand on her shoulder. She flinched, then looked up at him. "You really mean to help her?" she asked. "Yes." "Why?" That question was sharper than any weapon in the room. He looked toward the bed where Lillian lay pale against white sheets. "Because I should have found her sooner." Amara was given food in a smaller sitting room beside the bedchamber. But she ate like a child, expecting the plate to vanish at any moment. Bread first, then meat, then fruit she had likely never tasted. Darius watched from the doorway, learning things he hated learning. She hid pieces in her pocket without realizing he saw. She drank too fast. She kept glancing toward the exit as if she expected someone to throw her out once she had taken too much. "No one is going to take it away," he said. She froze with a piece of bread halfway to her mouth. "People always do," she said simply. Darius had no answer for that. He had commanded armies, broken rebellions, negotiated ancient blood feuds, but that single sentence from a starving child left him wordless. Amara lowered the bread slowly. "Are you really the king?" she asked. "Yes." "Then why does your castle feel sad?" He almost laughed, but nothing in him was strong enough for laughter. "Because some places learn the shape of the people they keep." Amara frowned like she was trying to understand. "Then maybe your castle misses someone." Before Darius could answer, shouting erupted in the corridor. A servant burst in, white-faced. "Your Majesty, the council emissaries have arrived. They demand immediate audience regarding the woman and the child." Darius's expression went cold at once. "Of course they do." He turned to Amara. "Stay here." She stood so quickly her chair scraped the floor. "No. Amara, those are the men who wanted my mother dragged away, right? If you go alone, they'll lie. Grown-ups always lie when kids aren't there." Darius stared at her, then gave the smallest nod. "Then you stay behind me and say nothing unless I ask." "I don't promise that," she muttered. Against all reason, something almost like pride moved through him. The receiving hall below was already thick with tension. Elder Marcellus stood at its center in white council robes, tall and severe and almost holy if one did not look at the eyes. His eyes gave him away, pale, dry, cruel. He smiled when Darius entered, but the smile disappeared the moment he saw Amara beside him. "Your Majesty," Marcellus said smoothly, "we came as soon as we heard. I regret the unpleasantness in the market. The woman's detention was merely precautionary." Darius descended the steps one by one. "Precaution against what?" Marcellus folded his hands. "Against disruption, against superstition spreading among the lower districts, against dangerous rumors involving a child." His gaze drifted to Amara. The temperature in the room seemed to drop. "Some births," he said, "carry consequences beyond the family." Darius stopped moving. "Choose your next words carefully." Marcellus smiled again, thinner this time. "I only mean that the council has a responsibility to inspect abnormalities before sentiment clouds judgment." Amara stepped out from behind Darius before anyone could stop her. "I'm not abnormal," she said. Marcellus looked down at her as if examining an insect pinned to glass. "No," she tightened her fists. "No, I sell roses, I help my mother. I'm better at reading than the boys in our alley, and I've never dragged a sick woman through the street, so I think I'm doing better than you." One of the guards choked back a laugh and paid for it with a glare. Marcellus's smile vanished entirely. Boldness in a child is charming until it becomes dangerous. Darius moved just enough to put himself fully between them. "My patience is gone, Marcellus, speak plainly." The elder's eyes sharpened. "Plainly, very well. The child cannot remain beyond council review. There are prophecies concerning unions between mortal women and creatures of the crown. If the girl is what I suspect, the realm is at risk." "The realm," Darius said softly, "or your power over it." The room went still. Marcellus recovered quickly. "You grieve old wounds, your Majesty, I understand. The woman resembles someone you once favored, but resemblance is not proof, pain is not proof, nostalgia is not law." Darius felt the old fury rising now, hot and black. "Careful," Marcellus inclined his head. "Then let me be more direct. 6 years ago you compromised yourself with a human. If word spreads that she survived and bore a child, every rival house will use it. The council protected you once. We can do so again. Surrender them quietly and this can be resolved without spectacle." Amara grabbed Darius's hand without thinking. The room saw it. Everyone saw it. The ancient king looked down at the small, dirty hand wrapped around two of his fingers and something final snapped inside him. "You mistake me," he said, voice low and deadly. "I do not fear spectacle. I fear discovering how many lies were spoken to me in my own house." Marcellus's expression changed for the first time. Not much, just enough. Darius saw it. So did Amara, though she did not yet understand what she had seen. The council elder tried one last tactic. "Your Majesty, if the girl remains near the woman, truth may become impossible to separate from manipulation. Sick minds cling to comforting fantasies. Memory is a fragile thing." That line hit Darius harder than Marcellus knew, because memory was exactly what was wrong. Lillian had looked at him with emptiness, not hatred, not guilt, emptiness. He turned that thought over again and again until it cut. "Leave," he said. Marcellus blinked. "I beg your pardon. Leave my castle before I have you thrown from it." Marcellus straightened slowly, dignity hardening over insult. Then I will convene the full council by dawn. Do that. And if the council declares the child a threat, Darius's eyes burned, then they can come test that theory themselves. Marcellus bowed the bare minimum and turned, but before he reached the doors, Amara spoke again. "Why are you scared of me?" The elder stopped. He did not turn around. For one tiny second, the whole room felt his hatred like a knife dragged across glass. Then he walked out without answering. That night the storm came hard against the castle. Rain battered the stained glass windows. Wind screamed through the towers. Lillian's fever raged on. Darius remained beside her bed while Amara drifted in and out of uneasy sleep on a couch near the fire. At some point after midnight, Lillian began whispering in her fever, not random words, names, places, fragments. "The clearing, roses, don't let them, Darius." He went perfectly still. Then she gasped and clawed weakly at the blanket. "No. No, not the child, please." Darius took her hand. Lillian, her eyes fluttered but did not open. They took. Then the words dissolved into broken breathing. Amara sat up on the couch, awake instantly. "She says that sometimes," the girl whispered. "Mostly when the fever gets bad, she talks about a forest and somebody she can't remember. I thought maybe it was a dream." Darius looked at her, then back at Lillian, then at the old silver locket hanging from the woman's throat. He knew that locket. He knew it because he had commissioned it himself. Carefully, like touching a wound, he lifted the chain. The pendant was worn from years of use. His thumb pressed the hidden latch. It opened. Inside was the engraving he had chosen with shaking hands 6 years ago, 2 crescent moons facing each other around a star. Lillian had kept it all this time. Even with her memories ruined, she had kept it. Darius felt something break open in his chest so violently he had to grip the edge of the bed. Amara slipped from the couch and came closer. "You know that?" she asked. He could barely answer. "Yes. Mama says it's the only thing she had when she woke up in Thornwick 6 years ago. She didn't know where it came from, but she never sold it, even when we had no food." Darius closed the locket with trembling fingers. A king was not supposed to tremble. He did not care. "No," he said, almost to himself. "She did not leave me." Amara stared up at him. "What?" He looked down at the child, at the pale hair and gray eyes and stubborn little mouth. "I was told she betrayed me, that she ran before dawn because she feared what I was." "That's stupid," Amara said at once. "My mother isn't a coward." The blunt certainty in her voice almost hurt. Darius nodded slowly. "No, she is." He ordered the castle archives opened before sunrise. If someone had stolen Lillian from him, there would be traces. Orders, payments, missing records, sealed decrees. He took Amara with him because she refused to be left behind and because, to his private shame, he no longer wanted her out of his sight. The archive halls were cold, endless, and lined with the bones of old secrets. Lamps burned blue over shelves of ledgers and scrolls. The royal steward, Renz, met them there with a face like old paper. He had served Darius for decades and had learned how not to sweat. Yet tonight he was sweating. Darius noticed. "Bring me everything related to district detentions, quiet removals, and council authorizations from 6 years ago," he said. Renz hesitated 1 second too long. Darius's voice sharpened. "Now," the steward bowed and hurried away. Amara leaned close to Darius and whispered, "He knows something." Darius looked down. "Why do you say that?" she shrugged. "Because he looks like the bread seller when he waters down the soup and hopes no one notices." Darius almost smiled again. Almost. Hours passed in the archive while wind hammered the windows. Renz brought record after record. Most said little, some said nothing. Then Darius found a gap. 3 days of transport logs missing from the week Lillian disappeared. Not burned, removed, deliberately. He placed the ledger flat on the table. "Renz," the steward stiffened. "Yes, your majesty, who removed these pages. I do not know." Darius lifted his gaze slowly. "You do." Renz swallowed. I was instructed not to speak of council matters." "You are speaking to the crown." Silence. The lamps crackled. Amara watched the steward like a hawk in a child's body. Ren's hands shook. "If I answer," he whispered, "I die." Darius stepped closer. "If you do not answer, I promise your death will be the kinder outcome." The old steward closed his eyes. "Elder Marcellus," he said at last. He ordered the transport sealed and the records erased. He said the woman was carrying a threat to the kingdom. He said it had to be hidden until the right time. Darius's whole body went still. What threat? Ren's eyes flicked toward Amara. He could not make himself say it. He did not need to. Amara slowly looked from one man to the other. Me, she asked. No one answered. That was answer enough. Darius felt the air in the archive change, as if the entire castle had leaned in to hear the truth. You helped them, he asked Renz. The steward dropped to his knees. I was ordered. The council outranked us all in these matters. They said if you knew, there would be war. They said the child had to be born away from you, raised in ignorance, kept weak. Darius grabbed him by the collar and hauled him up across the table with strength that snapped old wood. Scrolls crashed to the floor. Lamps shook. Amara flinched but did not back away. Kept weak, Darius repeated. His voice no longer sounded human. You let them throw her into poverty. You let them starve He stopped. The word had almost come out. It thundered in his head anyway. Mine. Renz was crying now. Mercy, my lord. Did Marcellus intend to kill the child? Darius asked. Eventually, Renz whispered. When the signs appeared, when the prophecy could be confirmed, they feared what she might become. The room went silent again. Amara stared at Darius, and for the first time real fear entered her face. Not fear of the king, fear of the truth pressing in. What prophecy? She asked. Darius released Renz so violently the old steward collapsed. Darius turned away and braced both hands on the archive table. For a moment he said nothing. When he finally spoke, his voice was rough with fury and something deeper, something almost like terror. A child born of a mortal woman and a ruler of the night, a bridge between what should never join, a bloodline that could end the council's power. Amara's voice came out tiny. You mean my father? Darius looked at her at last, her eyes. Lillian's eyes, but not only Lillian's. The timing, the locket. The missing records, the child hidden exactly 6 years. There was no room left for denial. Yes, he said, I think you just found him. Amara did not cry. That would have been easier. Instead, she stood very still, as if one wrong movement might shatter the world around her. You're saying, she could not finish. Darius crossed the distance between them slowly, like approaching something sacred and fragile. He knelt to her level in the cold archive light. I am saying, he answered, that 6 years ago I loved your mother. I was going to ask her to stay with me forever. Before I could, she vanished. I was told she fled. Tonight I learned she was taken, hidden, broken, and you were raised in the ruins of what they stole from us. Amara's lips trembled. So you're really, Darius swallowed once. It felt harder than battle. Yes. She stared at him for a long moment. Then she asked the question only a child would ask at a moment like that. If you're my father, why didn't you come get us sooner? The answer cut straight to bone. Because I failed. Before anything else could be said, the castle bells exploded overhead. Not once, not twice. 7 rapid strikes, alarm, attack. Guards shouted in the corridors. A horn answered from the eastern wall. Renz scrambled up in panic. They're early, he gasped. Darius was already standing, eyes blazing red. Who? But he knew. He knew before the captain burst into the archive covered in rain. Your Majesty, council riders at the gates, not envoys, armed. Elder Marcellus demands immediate surrender of the child under ancient emergency law. Amara looked up at Darius, pale now but steady. They came for me. Darius drew his sword in one smooth motion. Black steel flashed blue under the archive lamps. No, he said, every word sharp as judgment. They came to die disappointed. He turned to the captain. Lock down the west tower. Double the guard on Lillian's chamber. No one enters without my blood permission. Then he looked at Amara, the child who had arrived with roses and hunger and turned his dead kingdom upside down in a single night. Stay behind me, he said. Whatever happens next, do not run from me. Amara gripped the crushed roses still tucked into her basket and nodded with a bravery no 6-year-old should ever need. Thunder shook the castle. Somewhere below, the great front gates began to groan under the weight of men who had come to take her. And as Darius Vailmont strode toward the coming war with his daughter at his side, only one thought burned in his mind. If the council wanted the child, then by sunrise the entire kingdom would learn exactly what kind of monster they had forced their king to become. The gates did not open. They exploded. Iron screamed apart as council siege hooks tore through the front chains and ripped one side inward hard enough to crack the stone arch. Rain blew into the entry court in sheets. Torches hissed. Horses shrieked. Council riders poured through the breach in pale armor and white cloaks, their silver insignia flashing like knives in the storm. At their center rode Elder Marcellus beneath a black umbrella held by a servant who was shaking so hard he nearly dropped it. The old vampire looked less like a statesman now, and more like what he truly was, a patient butcher finally tired of pretending he was civilized. The defenders of Valemont Castle surged to meet them, but Marcellus raised one hand and the courtyard filled with his voice, amplified by old magic. By emergency decree of the High Council, the child called Amara Wells is declared a threat to the realm. Surrender her, and no further blood need be spilled. His words rolled across the storm like thunder. Darius stepped onto the upper balcony above the shattered gate with Amara just behind him and half the castle guard at his back. Rain streaked his black cloak. His iron crown gleamed wet and cruel under the lightning. "You came armed to my home in the middle of the night," he called down. "Do not insult me by pretending this is anything except treason." The entire courtyard stilled for one stretched second. Treason. The word hit harder than arrows. Council guards glanced at one another. Lesser nobles hiding under the archways began whispering fast and low. Marcellus did not flinch. "You mistake passion for law, your majesty. The child's existence endangers every vampire in this kingdom. You are compromised." Darius's hand tightened on the balcony rail until the carved stone cracked beneath his fingers. "And you mistake habit for power. You kidnapped a woman under my protection, stripped her memories, hid my child in poverty, and now ride to my gates demanding obedience. No, tonight you answer to me." Marcellus's pale face hardened. "Then let all witnesses hear this clearly. The king chooses a human bastard over his own kind." A murmur moved through the court below, sharp and ugly and dangerous. Amara felt it at once. The shift, the uncertainty, the fear being turned against her. She stepped closer to the balcony edge before Darius could stop her. Rain soaked her pale hair flat against her red dress. She looked tiny against the storm and the stone and the hundreds of armed eyes fixed on her. "If your kind needs a starving child to be weak so you can feel safe," she shouted down, "then maybe your kind isn't very strong." For one heartbeat nobody moved. Then a few soldiers on the wall actually laughed. Marcellus's face became a mask. He struck first, not with steel, with shame. "Child," he said smoothly, voice carrying with magical force, "do you even know what he is? This king standing beside you has drowned rebellions in blood. He has burned villages that defied his taxes. He has ordered executions without trial. Is that the father you want?" The courtyard shifted again. Amara looked up at Darius instinctively. She saw it in his face. The silence, the old guilt. He had done monstrous things, not lies, not exaggerations, real things. Marcellus saw her hesitation and pressed harder. "Ask him how many people cried for mercy. Ask him how many daughters lost fathers because their king preferred fear to justice." Darius said nothing. The truth was a blade, and Marcellus knew exactly where to place it. For the first time since entering the castle, Amara felt a tremor of doubt. Not because she believed Marcellus cared, but because she suddenly understood that the man beside her was not just wounded and lonely and kind to her mother. He was also a king shaped by violence, a predator with a throne. And Marcellus had chosen the perfect moment to make her see it. Darius could have lied, he could have roared, denied, twisted, commanded. Instead he spoke without looking at her. Some of it is true. The admission hit the courtyard like a physical blow. Amara stared. Marcellus smiled thinly. There, even now he can't deny it. Darius finally turned to her, rain running down his face like silver tears. "I have done things I am not proud of, things I once told myself were necessary. I ruled through fear because fear was easier than hope, and because men like him built a kingdom where mercy looked like weakness." His ember eyes locked on hers. "But none of that changes what he did to your mother. None of that changes what he planned for you. I will not lie to make myself look cleaner than I am." That answer was not what Marcellus wanted. It was too raw, too honest. Some of the nobles below looked unsettled now, not by Darius's crimes, but by the fact that he had confessed them publicly. Kings did not confess. Monsters did not apologize. Yet the storm was full of witnesses, and suddenly the old shapes of power no longer fit as neatly as they had an hour ago. Marcellus sensed the ground shifting and changed tactics fast. "Enough theater," he snapped. "Archers." Council bowmen stepped forward under the broken gate. Their arrows were silver-tipped, not meant for ordinary targets. Darius moved instantly, pushing Amara back. Castle guards lowered shields around them. "One arrow loosed," Darius called coldly, "and I take your heads before they touch the stones." Marcellus spread his hands. "Then surrender the girl and spare everyone else." From below the balcony, the captain of Vailmont's guard shouted up, "My king, the east court is compromised. More council forces scaling the inner wall." Marcellus had not come for a debate. He had come with a pincer strike. While everyone watched the gate, another team was breaching the heart of the castle. Amara felt Darius's entire body change beside her. Less wounded man, more war king, more ancient predator. It was terrifying. It was magnificent. And it made her realize just how much blood the council had forced into this night. The battle spread through the fortress like fire through dry cloth. Darius sent half his guard to the east court and the rest to hold the balcony approach. He took Amara himself, moving fast through torchlit corridors while steel rang in distant chambers and servants fled into side passages. "Where are we going?" she asked, trying to keep up. "To your mother." "Can't the guards protect her?" "Not from what Marcellus will send next." They reached the West Tower chamber to find the physicians backed against the wall in terror and Lillian half sitting in bed, fever-bright and confused, while 3 council infiltrators in servant gray stood with blades drawn. One already had a hand in Lillian's hair, holding her head back. "Stay where you are," he warned when Darius entered. "One step and she dies." Amara made a sound like a wounded animal. Darius stopped instantly. The room held its breath. Rain hammered the windows. The infiltrator's blade pressed lightly to Lillian's throat. "The child for the mother," he said. "Trade and everyone lives." Darius's face went completely empty. The kind of empty that meant death was close. Lillian's eyes found Amara and then Darius. Fear moved through her, yes, but also something else. Confusion, recognition trying to rise. "Don't," she whispered, voice raw with illness. "Don't give her to them." The infiltrator tightened his grip. "Quiet." Darius did not blink. "You misunderstand your position," the man sneered. "Do I?" "Yes," Darius said, and then he moved. Not at human speed. Not even at vampire speed the way storytellers described it. He became violent, stripped down to intention. 1 second the blade was at Lillian's throat. The next the attacker's wrist was in Darius's hand, snapped backward with a wet crack. The sword in Darius's other hand punched through the second infiltrator before the body even had time to fall. The third rushed Amara, perhaps thinking the child would be easier prey. He never reached her. Amara threw up one hand instinctively, and every candle in the room flared white-hot. Fire leapt sideways like living rope and wrapped around the attacker's arm. He screamed and dropped his blade. The room froze. So did Amara. She stared at her own hand in shock. Darius turned at once, killing finished, and saw the flames bending toward the child without burning her skin. The surviving infiltrator tried to crawl for the door. Darius pinned him to the floor with one boot and the sword at his spine. "Who sent you?" The man laughed through blood. "You know who." Darius pressed harder. "What is Marcellus planning?" The infiltrator's smile turned ugly. "He doesn't need the child alive anymore, only the mother." Amara's blood went cold. "Why my mother?" she whispered. The man looked up at her with delight too cruel for any face. "Because she remembers more than she should." Darius's expression darkened. "She remembers nothing." "Not yet," the infiltrator coughed. "But fever breaks chains. Memory returns under pain. Marcellus knows. That's why she dies before dawn." Darius drove the sword down. The man's answer ended in a choked gasp. Amara flinched. Lillian turned away weakly. Silence crashed over the room, broken only by the storm and everyone's breathing. Then Lillian looked from the dead men to Darius's face and finally to the glowing candles still bending toward Amara like flowers seeking light. "What was that?" she whispered. No one answered right away. No one knew how. The fever broke just before first light, not gently, violently. Lillian arched in the bed with a cry that tore through the room, hands clawing at the blankets as if something inside her was ripping open. Physicians rushed forward and then back as a pulse of cold magic rolled through the chamber hard enough to crack the glass water basin on the bedside table. Amara grabbed her mother's hand. "Mama!" Lillian's eyes flew open. For one instant they were not clouded, not blank, not lost. They were clear. Clear and full of terror. She stared at Darius like a person dragged suddenly into sunlight after years underground. "You," she breathed, then her whole body shook. "No, no, no, they said you were dead." Darius stepped forward so fast he nearly knocked over the chair beside the bed. "Lillian." She recoiled, then stared harder, the old scar near his throat, the iron crown, the voice. Recognition slammed into her in pieces. "The forest," she whispered. "The roses, the clearing." Tears filled her eyes. "Darius." He knelt beside the bed, not caring who saw a king kneel. "Yes." Lillian made a broken sound in her throat, and then the memories came. They hit her in fragments at first. Moonlight through trees, her own laughter, a silver locket opening in his hand, a promise not yet spoken. Then darker pieces forced their way in. Cloth over her mouth, the stink of chemicals, white council robes in a cellar lit by blue fire. Marcellus leaning over her with pity twisted into cruelty. "You carry something that cannot be allowed." Her wrists chained, her mind freezing under enchantment. A command repeated until it cut grooves in her soul: forget him. Forget the castle, forget the child's father, wake poor, wake alone, raise the girl until we come. Lillian screamed so sharply the physicians backed into the wall. Amara clung to her, crying now. Darius caught her shoulders. "Lillian, look at me," she did, and all at once she knew him, not the king in stories, not the monster the city feared, the man in the moonlit clearing who had made her feel chosen. Her face collapsed under the weight of 6 stolen years. "They took me," she sobbed. "They took everything." Darius closed his eyes once, like a man being stabbed slowly. When he opened them, there was nothing left in them now except murder. Amara looked between them, breath hitching as understanding finally reached full shape. "You know each other." Lillian turned to her daughter, horror and love flooding her face together. "Amara," her voice broke. "Your father," she looked back at Darius, and even now that truth was overwhelming. The child saw it happen in both of them at once. The recognition, the grief, the impossible shape of the family the council had shattered. "He is," Lillian whispered. "He's your father." No thunder could have matched the force of those words inside the room. Amara stood very still again, but this time the stillness was different. Not doubt, not fear, a reordering of the entire world. Darius did not move toward her. He did not claim, he did not force the moment. "Only if you want that truth," he said quietly. "I will not put another chain on either of you." Amara's eyes filled. "You already knew," he nodded once. "I suspected." "And you still stayed." Lillian gave a weak, incredulous laugh through tears. "He brought an army against the council before dawn, sweetheart. I think that means yes." Then the tower shook, not from thunder, from impact. A siege charge detonated somewhere below the west stair. Dust rained from the ceiling. One of the guards at the door shouted, "They're inside the tower." Darius stood at once and turned to the captain. "Get them to the crypt passage." Lillian tried to rise. "No, I'm not running again." "This is not running," Darius said. "This is surviving long enough for me to end this." Lillian met his eyes, and for a brief second they were back in the forest 6 years ago, 2 stubborn people refusing to bend. "If you leave us hidden while you go die for pride, I will hate you." Darius stared, then gave a rough breath that might almost have been a laugh in another life. "There you are." He turned to the captain. "Change of plan, bring them to the Hall of Crowns." The captain blinked in disbelief. "My lord, that chamber is exposed." "Exactly," Darius said. "If Marcellus wants them, he comes where every noble in the castle can see what he is willing to do for power." It was reckless, public, dangerous. It was also brilliant. The council thrived in shadows, in sealed orders and quiet abductions and lies spoken in rooms without witnesses. Darius had just decided to drag the truth into the most visible chamber in the kingdom. The Hall of Crowns filled before sunrise. Word spread faster than fire through dry rafters. Nobles stumbled from their quarters in silk and armor. Council loyalists slipped into the crowd trying to gauge who held power now. Soldiers lined the black marble walls under burning chandeliers. At the far end stood the throne platform beneath banners old enough to remember different dynasties. Darius entered through the central doors with blood on his collar, sword in hand, and Lillian and Amara beside him. The sight alone nearly split the room. The missing woman, the hidden child, the king walking openly with both. Gasps rose like a wave. Some nobles bowed out of instinct. Others did not know what to do. Lillian was pale but standing. Amara held her mother's hand with one fist, and a single knight rose with the other. Darius led them not behind the throne but in front of it where everyone could see them equally. That choice was no accident. He wanted witnesses, not subjects. He wanted truth before hierarchy. Marcellus arrived moments later through the northern doors in a sweep of white robes and armed retainers. He stopped when he saw Lillian standing alive. Shock cracked his composure at last. Tiny, but there. Darius savored it. "You look disappointed," the king said. Marcellus recovered fast. "I look at a ruler who has lost his mind in public." He scanned the room, judging loyalties, calculating. "Stand aside, your majesty. The council can still contain this before it becomes catastrophe." Lillian stepped forward before Darius could answer. Her voice shook but carried. "Contain what? Your crimes?" The room turned to her. Marcellus's eyes narrowed. "You are unwell. I was drugged, imprisoned, stripped of my memory and dumped in a slum to raise my own child in ignorance while your men waited to take her. I am many things. Unwell is the least interesting." A ripple of shock ran through the hall. Some nobles looked horrified. Others looked thrilled. This was beyond scandal now. This was regime rot cracking open in front of them. Marcellus lifted his chin. A fevered woman's ravings are not evidence. Darius reached into his cloak and withdrew the silver locket. "Then perhaps this is." He held it up. "Recognize it, Marcellus." The elder's silence was answer enough to anyone paying attention. Darius pressed on. "My gift to Lillian on the night she vanished. Found on her body when she woke memoryless 6 years ago. Strange, is it not, that your people could erase her past, but missed the one object linking her to me?" Marcellus sneered. "Circumstance." "Then let us discuss records," Darius said. He gestured. Renz the steward was dragged in by guards, shaking so hard he could barely stand. The old man fell to his knees. "Tell them." Renz burst into tears before the words even came. "The council ordered it," he choked out. Elder Marcellus ordered Lillian Wells taken, memory stripped, relocated to Thornwick under false papers and supervised scarcity. The child was to be observed, not killed, until the signs manifested. The hall exploded in shouts. Marcellus's retainers reached for weapons. Castle guards did the same. Darius raised one hand and the noise dipped. "Say the rest, Renz." The steward pressed his forehead to the floor. When the child proved dangerous, the mother was to be terminated and the girl delivered to the council chambers for separation and study. Amara felt Lillian's hand tighten around hers so hard it hurt. Did not pull away. Marcellus stopped pretending then. The pious mask fell clean off. "Yes," he said into the uproar, voice suddenly hard and contemptuous. "Yes, because I did what had to be done. I protected this kingdom from a prophecy that would destroy it, from a child bred out of weakness, from a king so hungry for mortal affection he was willing to doom us all." The confession slammed into the hall like an avalanche. Nobles recoiled. Guards looked sick. Even some council loyalists faltered. Marcellus had just admitted everything, and he did not care, because in his mind he was still righteous. Darius stepped down one stair from the throne platform. "There it is," he said. "Not law, fear." Marcellus spread his hands. "Fear keeps kingdoms alive." "No," Darius answered. "Fear keeps men like you in charge." Marcellus's pale gaze shifted to the crowd. He knew the ground was slipping, so he reached for the oldest weapon left, panic. "Look at the child," he shouted. "What do you think she will become? A bridge, a blessing? No, she is the end of order. If mortal and vampire can join, what stops the bloodlines from collapsing? What stops the throne itself from becoming sentimental, weak, deluded?" Some in the room responded to that. Darius saw it. The old prejudices, the terror of change, the comfort of cruelty. He also saw something else. Amara heard it too. The uncertainty was no longer aimed only at her. It had split. Now the nobles were looking at Marcellus and seeing not certainty but hunger, not wisdom but rot. That was when Marcellus made his fatal mistake. He looked at Amara and said, "Child, tell them, have you not already felt it, the strange power in you, the fire that bends, the way light listens? You are not normal, you are not safe." He expected shame, he expected fear, he expected the room to recoil from her. Instead, Amara stepped away from her mother and walked to the center of the black marble floor. The hall watched, silent enough to hear the chandeliers crackle overhead. She looked at the nobles, the guards, the servants, then finally at Marcellus. "No," she said, "I'm not normal. Normal people saw my mother sick and starving and did nothing. Normal people let men like you decide who gets to live in the dark. If being like you is normal, then I don't want it." A murmur went through the hall. Stronger this time, not gossip, approval. Marcellus hissed, "You arrogant little—" Amara lifted her hand, and without meaning to, she reached for the nearest thing alive. The single night rose she had carried all night, its petals were bruised, stem bent, nearly dead. The room watched it unfurl in her fingers. Color returned. Thorns straightened. The bloom opened wide as if dawn had touched it. Several people gasped aloud. Lillian stared at her daughter in wonder. Darius stared too, but there was no fear in him now. Only brutal, aching pride. Marcellus saw the nobles' faces and understood in one horrifying instant that the power dynamic had flipped. The child he called an abomination did not look like a threat. She looked like a miracle. That was the midpoint where everything changed. Until now, Marcellus had controlled the narrative. He had framed Amara as danger, Lillian as madness, Darius as weakness. But the moment the dead rose bloomed in the child's hand, the room no longer saw scandal. It saw possibility. The fear shifted sides, and Marcellus felt it. He did what desperate men always do when they are losing power in public. He reached for blood. With a snarl, he drew a silver dagger from inside his sleeve and hurled it straight at Lillian's throat. Darius moved, but Amara moved first. She screamed, not with words but with instinct, and every candelabra in the hall flared so bright the room vanished in white fire. The dagger froze in midair, not by metal, by vines. Black rose vines burst from the cracks between marble tiles and wrapped around the blade before it could travel another inch. The hall erupted. Nobles stumbled back. Guards shouted. The dagger dropped harmlessly at Lillian's feet. Amara stood in the center of the chaos with the rose still open in her hand and tears shining on her cheeks. Marcellus looked at her like he was staring at the end of his world. Darius descended the rest of the stairs very slowly. Every step was death approaching. "You attacked an unarmed woman under my roof during open witness," he said. "Do you understand what that makes you?" Marcellus tried to call his guards, but they hesitated. Some lowered weapons, some backed away from him outright. The old certainty was gone. "I am the council," he roared. "I am the wall between this realm and ruin." "No," Lillian said, voice suddenly clear and cutting. "You are the reason ruin reached this far." She moved to stand beside Amara now, and for the first time all night she did not look like prey. She looked like a mother who remembered exactly what had been taken from her and had finally run out of fear. Marcellus's lip curled. "You think love makes you brave?" Lillian met his gaze. "No, you made me brave. Poverty did. Hunger did. Raising a child alone after you hollowed out my mind did. Love just gave me a reason not to die." That line hit the room like a whip. Even hardened soldiers looked shaken. Darius did not take his eyes off Marcellus. "Kneel," he ordered. The elder laughed. "To you?" "No," Darius said. "To the truth." Marcellus refused. Of course he did. So Darius invoked something older than the council, older than the throne, older even than fear. "Trial by blood witness," he declared, voice ringing through the hall with the force of ancient law. Some nobles gasped. Others crossed themselves in old defensive gestures. Marcellus went pale. He knew what that meant. Under blood witness, lies spoken before the assembly became binding poison, not metaphor, magic. "You cannot invoke that without unanimous." "I am the crown," Darius said, "and you have attacked under witness. The law is mine." He cut his own palm with the edge of his sword and let the blood fall onto the black marble. The drops hissed. The floor lit with old crimson lines spiraling outward beneath everyone's feet. The chandeliers dimmed. The The walls seemed to breathe. The Hall of Crowns had become a courtroom, and the castle itself had chosen a side. Marcellus looked around and understood too late that he was trapped. Darius's blood had awakened older foundations than council decrees. "Answer plainly," the king commanded. "Did you order Lillian Wells taken 6 years ago?" Marcellus's jaw clenched. He tried silence. The glowing crimson lines crept up his boots like living cracks. "Answer." "Yes," he spat. The room recoiled as if struck. "You strip her memories against her will?" Darius asked. "Yes." The magic brightened. Marcellus's voice sounded wrong now, dragged out of him by force. "Did you hide her in poverty so the child would grow weak?" "Yes." Lillian closed her eyes. Amara gripped her hand harder. "Did you intend to murder Lillian Wells after the child's signs appeared?" Darius pressed. Marcellus's whole body shook, resisting, but Blood Witness did not care about pride. "Yes," he snarled. The crowd broke into furious noise. Darius raised one hand again. The room obeyed. "Last question," he said, and now even he sounded changed, less like a grieving man and more like judgment wearing flesh. "Did you lie to your king and manipulate the council to preserve your personal power?" Marcellus's face twisted with rage so intense it looked like agony. "I did what was necessary," he screamed. The blood magic flared white, rejecting the dodge. His knees buckled. Ash spilled from the corner of his mouth. "Yes," he choked at last. "Yes." The hall erupted for real then. Not murmurs, not whispers, outrage. The power had shattered, publicly, completely. Elder Marcellus, guardian of order, had just confessed under ancient law that he kidnapped, erased, starved, and planned to murder a mother and child to protect himself. And that was when the real reversal landed. Because one of Marcellus's own council captains stepped out of formation, removed his white cloak and dropped it to the floor. Then another did the same. Then a third. The gesture spread in ripples, not all, but enough. Enough to be seen, enough to matter. They were abandoning him, not because they had become moral overnight, but because predators knew when the apex had changed. Darius watched it happen without expression. Marcellus did not. His face cracked in disbelief. "Cowards," he hissed at them. "After all I built." "You built a prison," one former captain said flatly, "and called it law." Marcellus turned in a blind panic and lunged not at Darius this time, not at Lillian, but at the one person whose existence had undone him. Amara. It was stupid. It was doomed. It was exactly the kind of choice men make when they cannot bear being irrelevant. Darius intercepted him before he got 3 strides, steel flashing in a black arc that knocked the dagger from his hand and sent him crashing to the floor. The hall went still one last time as the king planted a boot on the elder's chest and lowered the sword to his throat. "Look at me," Darius said. Marcellus did, breathing hard, eyes full of disbelief and hate. "You stole 6 years from her," Darius said softly. "You stole 6 years from them, you stole 6 years from me, and the worst thing you ever did was think I would thank you for it." Marcellus laughed bitterly even now. "Kill me then, show them what you are." Darius's sword did not move. Not yet. He looked up at the hall, at the nobles, at the guards, at the servants who had survived on fear for generations. "You all want to know what happens next," he said. "Good, watch closely." He looked back down at Marcellus. "You were right about one thing. Tonight changes everything." Then he lifted the sword. The sword stopped 1 inch from Marcellus's throat. The whole hall had braced for blood. Nobles leaned forward. Guards tightened their grip on spears. Even Lillian held her breath, her arm wrapped protectively around Amara as if no victory was ever safe until it had survived the next heartbeat. Marcellus looked up from the floor and smiled through split lips, because this was the ending he wanted. A public execution. A king dragged back into the old shape. A monster choosing the easiest truth about himself. Darius saw it. He saw the hunger in the elder's face, the desperate hope that if he could not win, he could at least poison the victory. Slowly, deliberately, Darius lowered the blade. The room did not understand at first. Neither did Marcellus. "No," Darius said, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "You do not get to die quickly and call it justice." A wave of stunned silence rolled through the chamber. Darius stepped back and let the elder breathe. "You wanted this kingdom ruled by fear. You wanted children hidden, women broken, and truth buried because fear kept your hands on power. So hear my judgment. Elder Marcellus is stripped of title, blood rights, council, authority, estate, and name. His lands are dissolved. His decrees are void. His loyalist houses will stand trial under open witness. And he, Darius looked down at the man who had stolen 6 years of his family's life, will live long enough to watch the world he built choose something better. The room erupted. Some shouted approval, some cried out in disbelief, some wanted blood because blood felt cleaner than rebuilding. Marcellus himself looked more wounded by mercy than he would have by steel. Coward, he spat, pushing himself onto one elbow. You still want them to think you are noble. Darius's expression did not shift. No, I want them to think. He nodded once to the guards. Take him. They hesitated for half a second because habit dies slowly. Then 4 stepped forward, and not one of them wore the white council sash anymore. They dragged Marcellus upright while he fought and cursed and promised ruin. His voice cracked when he looked at the nobles who had once bowed to him and found only avoidance. No rescue. No alliance. No fear. Just a disgraced old tyrant being carried away by the men who used to protect him. At the doors he twisted violently and screamed at Amara, "This isn't over, the prophecy will break you. It will break all of them." Amara stared back at him, pale and shaking but steady. Then maybe what needs breaking should break. The hall heard her. And this time the silence that followed belonged to her. After Marcellus was taken, the chamber did not calm. It changed shape. That was more dangerous. Victory was one thing. Rebuilding power in a room full of vampires who had lived on hierarchy and fear for centuries was something else entirely. One of the elder nobles stepped forward first, an old lord in black velvet whose family had survived 4 kings by never speaking too soon. He bowed to Darius, then glanced at Lillian and Amara. Your Majesty, with the council compromised, the realm will require immediate succession protections, emergency law review, and clarification of the child's status. He meant it as politics, but the words hit like insult anyway. Status. As if Amara were a disputed border instead of a little girl who had nearly been murdered twice before dawn. Darius's face darkened at once, but Lillian touched his arm before he could answer. It was a small motion. Private. Familiar in a way that made the room notice. She stepped forward herself, shoulders still weak from illness but spine straight. Her status, Lillian said, is that she is a child, my daughter, his daughter, not your experiment, not your theory, not a symbol you get to carve apart for comfort. The old noble lowered his eyes at once. The room shifted again. Darius could command fear. Lillian could command shame. Together they were becoming something the court had no language for. A younger noblewoman stepped out next, one Darius recognized as Lady Seraphine of the Eastern Houses, clever enough to survive by reading the wind before it turned. Then let the language be made, she said clearly. If the old laws have no place for what stands before us, perhaps the old laws are the problem. Several heads turned toward her sharply. A dangerous statement, also a timely one. She looked directly at Darius. Your Majesty, if you intend this night to mean anything beyond scandal, say so now. Half this room is waiting to see whether they should kneel to the future or run from it. Darius almost respected the bluntness. He looked out over the gathered nobles, soldiers, scholars, servants, and opportunists, every face lit by chandeliers that had watched centuries of controlled cruelty. He realized that if he failed this moment, the story would harden around the wrong truth. Not stolen woman restored. Not child reclaimed, not tyrant exposed. No, the story would become only this, a king weakened by private emotion. He would not allow it. So he did something that shocked them more than blood magic, more than confession, more than the council's collapse. He removed his crown. The iron circlet left his head slowly, its thorns catching candlelight, and for a terrible moment the hall did not breathe. Kings did not uncover themselves before a court in crisis. Kings especially did not descend from the throne platform carrying the symbol of their own authority in both hands. Darius walked down the black steps until he stood on the same level as Lillian and Amara. Then he turned to face the room. For too long, he said, this crown was used as proof that fear works. That distance keeps order. that if a king is terrifying enough, no one will ask what was buried to build his peace. He looked at the iron in his hands. Men like Marcellus thrived under that arrangement because it made cruelty look efficient. He raised his gaze again. Tonight I learned the cost of that peace was not abstract. It had a face, it had a name, it had a child selling roses in the cold while I sat in a castle full of ghosts. No one moved, no one even tried to interrupt. So hear me now, he said. This crown will not remain what it was. He turned then not to the nobles but to Amara. The room watched the king of Valemont kneel in front of a 6-year-old girl for the second time that night. His voice, when it came, was no longer that of a ruler making decree. It was a man asking a question that terrified him because it could not be commanded. Amara Wells, he said softly, I know what blood says. I know what old law says. I know what prophecy says. But none of that matters more than choice. So I ask you in front of everyone here, do you want me as your father? The hall seemed to tilt. Lillian's hand flew to her mouth. Several nobles looked almost offended by the humility of the moment. Others looked shaken by it. Because this was the true reversal, not a tyrant defeated, a king asking instead of taking. Amara stared at him, at the pale face that looked fierce even in vulnerability, at the man who had confessed his own sins rather than lie to win her, at the stranger who had become her father in the span of one impossible night. Her little chest rose and fell too quickly. Tears filled her eyes. You really mean I can say no? She whispered. Darius nodded once. Yes. That one word changed the room more than any magic had. Amara looked at her mother first. Lillian was crying openly now, but smiling through it with an ache that held 6 years of stolen time. She gave the smallest nod, not pressuring, only blessing. Amara turned back to Darius. I don't know you yet, she said honestly, voice shaking. And I'm still mad that you didn't find us sooner, even if it wasn't your fault. A few nobles looked scandalized that anyone would speak so plainly to the king. Darius only bowed his head. That is fair. Amara swallowed. But you came when it mattered. You protected Mama. You told the truth even when it made you look bad, and you asked me instead of deciding for me. She took one step closer. So, yes, I want you as my father. Darius closed his eyes. It was only for a second, but everyone in that room felt what it cost him to hear and survive that answer. When he opened them again, there was nothing cold in them. Only wonder and grief and something so fierce it almost hurt to witness. He set the iron crown on the marble floor beside him and opened his arms. Amara went into them without another word. The hall did not clap. It did not cheer. It simply watched a king become a father in real time. Lillian knelt beside them a moment later, and for the first time since entering the castle, the three of them touched without fear or distance between them. The image burned itself into every witness in the room. Not throne, not bloodline, not scandal, family, chosen in public. Lady Seraphine was the first to bend the knee. Then the captain of the guard, then servants, then nobles one by one until the black marble floor was full of bowed heads facing not just the king but the family beside him. It was not perfect loyalty. Some kneeled because they believed, some because they were practical, some because power had clearly moved and they wanted to survive it. Darius knew that. Lillian knew that, but Amara did not need to understand every motive to feel what happened next. She looked over the sea of kneeling figures and whispered, "Are they bowing to me?" Darius drew back just enough to answer her properly. "No," he said. "They are bowing to the truth." And something in the room settled. An old axis breaking, a new one forming. The eastern windows of the Hall of Crowns had been sealed for generations with layered iron shutters and ancient spells to keep dawn from touching the court too directly. As the night thinned outside, one of those seals began to hum. At first only the scholars noticed. Then the nearest guards did. A line of golden light slipped through the edge of the highest shutter where no opening should have existed. The air changed. Not hotter, cleaner, fresher. Like the castle itself had taken a breath after holding it for 200 years. All heads turned upward. The ancient shutter groaned and lifted 2 inches, then 4, then a foot, though no servant touched it. Several vampires recoiled by instinct. One hissed. Another crossed himself. But the light that entered the hall was not harsh. It did not arrive like punishment. It spilled across the black marble in soft amber ribbons and touched the room as if it had come to witness, not destroy. It reached the discarded iron crown first. Then the roses embroidered into the old banners. Then it slid, slow and deliberate, until it fell across Amara's hand. The star-shaped mark that had formed there earlier after Darius's blood touched her skin began to glow, not blinding, alive, responsive. The golden light met the silver pulse under her skin and seemed to recognize it. 100 people inhaled at once. Darius held very still. Lillian stared at their daughter's hand with tears shining again. Amara lifted it instinctively. Palm open to the dawn. The light widened. It touched Darius's sleeve, then his cheek. The hall froze, waiting for smoke, pain, any sign of the old law reasserting itself. None came. He did not burn. He did not even flinch. Instead, the hard lines of his face softened under the light as if some old cruelty in the architecture of the world had finally loosened. Someone in the crowd whispered, "The gentle dawn." Another answered, "The prophecy." But Darius did not look at them. He looked only at Amara, the child who had arrived selling roses and was now changing the very physics of what the court believed. The midpoint twist had broken Marcellus. This was the final transformation. The room was no longer deciding whether to accept her. It was realizing it had never understood the limits of the world to begin with. Word spread through the castle before the sun had fully risen. By the time the family moved from the Hall of Crowns to the eastern parapet, half the fortress had gathered in galleries, corridors, and stair landings to watch. Human servants stood beside vampire officers, kitchen girls beside noble widows, stable boys beside archive scribes. No one wanted to miss the next thing this night might overturn. The eastern parapet doors opened onto the highest terrace overlooking Noctureth, where the city's narrow roof still glistened with storm rain. The sky beyond them blushed gold and rose. Darius stepped out first with Lillian and Amara between him and the horizon. The old instinct to keep to the shadows tugged at every vampire present, but no one moved back. They had come too far. The first edge of the sun lifted over the hills. Its light touched the parapet. Warm, soft, real. Amara smiled before anyone else understood what they were seeing. The star mark glowed again, and the dawn seemed to spread around her rather than through her, like a river redirected by joy instead of force. It washed over Lillian's worn dress and made it look almost regal. It touched Darius's pale skin and turned him from a creature of carved shadow into something stranger and more beautiful, a king who no longer had to disappear when morning arrived. Gasps broke out behind them, then crying, actual crying. An old vampire soldier fell to his knees and wept openly as sunlight touched his hands without burning them. The city below began to stir, faces lifting from windows and alleys as rumors ran faster than reason. They looked up and saw something impossible on the eastern height. The vampire king standing in dawn with a poor woman and a child beside him, none of them consumed, all of them illuminated. The kingdom did not change all at once. But in that second, everyone watching knew it could. Darius took a slow breath and raised his voice over the parapet so the fortress, the court, and the waking city below could hear him. "People of Valemont," he called, "for too long you were ruled by fear and told it was safety. For too long power hid its crimes behind tradition and called it order. That ends now." His words carried on morning air sharpened by storm wash and hope. Lillian Wells was taken from this kingdom's protection. Her memory was stolen. Her life was buried. Her daughter was hidden in hunger so the powerful could feel secure. That ends now. He turned and lifted Amara into his arms so the city could see her plainly. She was still just a child in a dress too plain for palaces, clutching one rose in one fist and his shoulder with the other. "This is Amara Wells," he said. "She is not your fear. She is your future if you have courage enough to deserve one." The crowd below swelled. Some bowed, some stared, some looked confused and frightened. Good, Darius thought. Let them be forced to think. "From this day," he declared, "the council's emergency powers are suspended. Every hidden detention order will be reviewed. Every sealed sentence will be opened. Every house that profited from forced disappearances will answer publicly. And this crown," he glanced back toward the fortress where the iron circlet still lay behind in the hall, will rule by covenant, not compulsion." Lillian stepped closer then, surprising even him. She had been poor for 6 years, sick for days, used, broken, discarded, and nearly erased. Yet when she spoke, the whole parapet quieted for her. "I was not saved by power," she said. "I was saved by love that remembered me and a child who kept asking the question everyone else was too afraid to ask." She looked down at the city where mothers, healers, laborers, and forgotten people were beginning to gather in doorways and streets. "If this kingdom wants to call itself new, then start with the people you made invisible. Feed them, hear them. Stop deciding that suffering in the shadows is an acceptable price for peace." Her eyes were full of tears and fury and hard-earned authority. "I lived in your peace. It was starvation with better manners." That line moved through the city like a thrown spark, because it was true, not poetic, true. Darius looked at her and understood with a kind of humbled awe that this kingdom did not just need his change. It needed her voice. It needed the moral wound made visible. Amara listened to both of them, then wriggled slightly until Darius set her back on her feet. She stepped to the parapet edge with more confidence than anyone her age should have possessed, pale hair glowing in sunlight, rose in hand. The crowd below hushed instinctively. Some smiled because she was small, some because she was brave, some because they already sensed children tell truths empires cannot survive intact. Amara held up the rose. "I was trying to sell flowers to buy medicine," she said, voice carrying strangely far in the clear air. "That's all I wanted. I didn't come here to change anything." A soft ripple of laughter moved through the crowd, broken and tender. She looked up at Darius, then at Lillian, then back to the city. "But if bad people only stay strong because everyone is scared to ask questions," she paused, small face serious, "then maybe the whole kingdom should start asking more." This time the laughter became applause. Not polite, real, uneven at first, then rising until it bounced off the stone and rolled through the waking streets. Darius stared at her with helpless pride. Lillian laughed through tears and pulled the child close. The sound of applause at sunrise in a vampire fortress felt like history learning a new language. Later, when the public declarations were done and the city had begun exploding with rumor, shock, outrage, celebration, and denial, the three of them returned quietly to the grand hall where Lillian's portrait still hung. Morning light now reached farther into the room than the builders had ever intended. It touched the gilded frame, the painted silk, the painted roses, and the younger face of the woman who had once stood there waiting for a future she did not get. For a long moment no one spoke. Then Amara walked toward the portrait and tilted her head. "She looks sad," she said. Lillian came beside her. "She was in love," she answered softly. "Sometimes that looks like sadness when someone paints the waiting part." Darius stood behind them, close enough now that the distance no longer felt like exile. "I commissioned it the night I meant to ask you to stay," he admitted. "I thought if I could make something beautiful enough, it might be easier to ask you for forever." Lillian turned to him, eyes wet again. "You didn't need the painting." He gave a rough, faint smile. "I know that now." Amara looked between the portrait and the real woman standing beside it. "Are you going to take it down?" she asked. Darius considered the question carefully. Once he might have ordered it removed because it hurt too much, or kept it because pain was all he had left. But the night had changed the meaning of every relic in the castle. Lillian rested her hand lightly on the frame. "No," she said before he could answer. "Leave it." Darius looked at her. "Even now," she nodded. "Especially now. It should stay where people can see what was almost stolen forever and what still came back." Amara thought about that for a second, then smiled. "So it's not just a sad picture anymore." "No," Darius said, coming forward at last. "Now it's evidence." That made Amara giggle in a way that startled all three of them. The sound was so bright in that old room that even the castle seemed to warm around it. Darius crouched beside her. "There is something else," he said. "You should know what your name means." Amara looked up. "Mama said it means forever." Lillian smiled softly. "I chose it without remembering why. Some part of me still knew." Darius nodded. "And the roses," Amara lifted the bloom in her hand. "The night-blooming kind your mother loved grow in darkness, yes, but they open for moonlight because they trust light even when it arrives gently." He touched one petal. "That is what you did here. You brought something gentle into a place built to fear it. Amara considered this with the seriousness she gave everything important. Then she looked at the portrait at the window, at the sunlight reaching farther into the hall than it had any right to reach. Before, she said slowly, you only had the painting. Darius and Lillian both watched her. Now you have the morning too. No prophecy line in any old book could have landed harder than that. Lillian broke first, laughing and crying all at once. Darius bowed his head, undone again by a child who kept saying the exact truth no one else had language for. He reached for Lillian's hand then, not dramatically, not like a king reclaiming something, like a man asking if the bridge between lost years and whatever came next could bear one more step. She let him take it. Their fingers fit with the tragic ease of people separated too long but not changed beyond recognition. Amara slipped her hand into both of theirs without asking permission, because children understand instinctively when a circle should close. And there, in the hall that had once felt like a mausoleum, morning light touching stone that had known only curated darkness, the three of them stood inside a future none of them had been allowed to imagine the night before. But a changed morning does not erase a damaged kingdom. Darius knew that. Lillian knew it too. Before the day ended, there would be trials, reforms, rebellions, bargains, betrayals, frightened nobles, opportunists, and bloodlines that refused to surrender power gracefully. Some would call the night a miracle. Some would call it a scandal. Some would sharpen knives in secret and wait for the first sign of weakness. That was real, all of it. Yet the most dangerous thing had already happened. The lie at the center of the kingdom had been dragged into sunlight and survived. A child had stood in the machinery of fear and asked a simple question no tyrant could survive being forced to answer honestly. Are you afraid? That question had broken a council elder, rewritten a king, restored a stolen woman, and taught an entire court that love was not the soft opposite of power. It was the force that made power answer for itself. By evening the city would tell the story 100 different ways. Some would say the poor flower girl bewitched the vampire king. Some would swear the dead roses bloomed in her hand. Some would insist the dawn itself bent around her. Let them talk. Stories spread faster than laws, and sometimes that is how kingdoms begin healing. The truest version was simpler and harder. A little girl went looking for medicine money and found the portrait of her mother in a house full of sorrow. She asked the right question. A man who had spent centuries ruling like a wound was forced to decide whether he wanted to stay a monster or become a father. A woman who had been erased remembered herself loudly enough to shame a nation. And a court built on silence watched the future walk in holding roses. Darius looked once more at the portrait, then at the living woman beside him and the child between them. His voice came out low but steady enough to carry the weight of everything that had changed. No one will ever bury either of you again. That was the decisive power shift line. Not a threat, a vow, not just to enemies, to the world that had allowed the burial the first time. And here is the question for the comments, because this story cuts both ways. If you were King Darius, would you have shown mercy to Marcellus and made him live with what he did? Or would you have executed him on the spot for stealing 6 years from your family? If you felt this story, like the video, subscribe, and watch my other dark romance and vampire drama stories next. Because if one little girl with roses could change a kingdom, wait until you see what happens in the next tale.